Welcome to Let's Talk, where Spokane Talks hosts seek out and discuss the latest on a variety of interesting topics to Spokane and North Idaho. Here's today's host, Mike Fitzsimmons.
Welcome to this edition of Let's Talk. I'm Mike Fitzsimmons, and the primary election is just around the corner in Spokane. And we're going to talk today with Tim Benn, who is running again for Spokane City Council. Tim, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It
is again. You've run before. You've won a primary, lost in a general, but you've still got a concern that you want to pursue until you get it done.
Well, I've certainly been encouraged by a lot of folks to run again. In the last campaign, we ran on basic reasons, getting representation for the citizens, and now I'm running with a little bit more desperation as folks are seeing the city take even a further turn away from the principles that they see are important to the city. And it's the basic promises that we hear from politicians on road conditions and budgets and, of course, property crime. And we haven't seen much movement in that property crime area especially. And the homeless conversation seems to be going in a different direction than the conversations I'm having with folks in the district.
We're seeing a city that seems to have some priorities that are a bit out of kilter. In light of the fact that the first thing that has to happen is a definition as to what are actually the functions of a municipality. What's it there for? And then how well are we performing those functions, and which of the functions that we are performing are really not what we ought to be engaged in?
Right. I definitely think that we have a priorities mix-up going on with our city government. Some of that has to do with lack of education, I think, of what the role of government really is. And sure, it's really nice to have great beautiful art around the city, but I think you don't want to park art next to a pothole. I think you've got to fix the pothole first. So I think those priorities are most important to the citizens. When we talk about property crime and homelessness, basically policing our streets is a really important function, and it's the drugs on the streets that are causing many of these other issues, and no one's addressed it. We're just plain ignoring it and trying to deal with the symptoms rather than the cause.
This is a problem, as long as you're talking about homelessness, that is a municipal problem all across the United States, not just a Spokane problem. But as you observe, the primary causes of homelessness are known, and we act as though they're not known.
Right.
We know, for example, that mental illness and substance abuse are the principal reasons why people are out on the street. Those are the principal reasons.
That's right.
But we think it's economic policy, and somehow or other, because economic policy is something that city councils and state legislatures and what have you can address and adjust to some extent one way or another. But that's really not the case. That's not attacking the problem.
Well, it's not dealing with the problem. I think one of the things about living in Spokane, and we can look at Spokane and address it nationwide, it's really the same causes, same symptoms. And about 15, 18 years ago, we had a big meth lab problem.
Yeah.
It was in North Idaho. It was in Spokane. It was in Seattle. And it was destroying homes, destroying communities and lives. And so what we did as a government is we said, we know the cause. And so we had certain ingredients, the ephedrins and whatnot, that were used by the meth cooks that were producing this toxic drug that was destroying families, lives, and communities. So they took that off of the open market, and to get large quantities, you have to have certain licenses and such. So the meth lab problem went away almost overnight. I mean, I had to help bust meth labs myself in my own community. The police were struggling with it, but a simple policy change and some changing to resale and wholesale items, the problem went away. Now what's happened is we have a foreign drug market that has filled that void, and over the years it's gotten worse. And it's really interesting. I have an interesting perspective on this because I've had foreign exchange students from Mexico. And one of the fathers, I asked him about our homeless problem because he came here to pick up his daughter, and he brought his family, wonderful family. And I asked him about the homeless problem and the drug problem in the streets of Mexico. And he says, we don't have one. I says, yeah, but there's all these drugs in Mexico from what we hear in the news. And he says, yes, but the customers are in the United States.
That's right.
He says, we won't tolerate it. We're not going to tolerate the property crime and those sorts of things in most of their communities. So we know where the drugs are coming from. In fact, I talked to law enforcement, and there's drug cartels that have a circuit that they run, and Spokane's become a hub, and we just stop the flow. That's what we need to do. And I've even asked Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich in public and in private, what if we were able to get a majority of the drugs off the streets? Now, you're never going to get all the drugs off the streets. When we had the meth lab problem, it was just meth. Now we've got meth, heroin, fentanyl. It's the things being shipped in, not cooked here. So if we can get the drugs off the streets, our head law enforcement officer, Ozzie Knezovich, says a vast majority of these problems will be diminished. And if people want to do drugs, now we can't solve international and national problems here in the city of Spokane, even though our city council seems to think they can sometimes. I think that, we deal with what's on our streets and inside of our city borders, and we just don't make drug addiction and drug sales welcome here. Then if the problem wants to continue, it'll have to continue somewhere else.
That takes a focus of resources on law enforcement that so far we have not made.
That's right. And I've asked law enforcement, where's our drug task force? And I hear a lot of silence.
There once was a drug task force, but we don't have one anymore.
They're very limited in what they do. And most of what they do is by happenstance. Most of it is by when they stumble across it, it's not a major function.
Let's take a look at something that just surfaced over the last couple of weeks and has been kicked around. This is the dispatching of fire resources. The city wants to keep its dispatchers doing city and city contractor type work, and the county has a regional-wide process that they're using. They're in the same building, but they're not allowed to work for the same cause, it seems. And now we have got a shortage of dispatchers for the city. Who thought this up?
Well, I don't know why the city's wanting to back out of it. They're the ones that voted to put it on the ballot. Right?
I know.
So we voted on it. We said we want good police response. We were sold a package as taxpayers, the same way we have been with several other packages that were not good deals. And now they're backing out of it. How do they get it back out of something that the voters approved? They should have done their due diligence. And if it wasn't a workable plan, they shouldn't have put it on the ballot.
But it was, and the voters approved it. The problem is, why are they not following through with the will of the people?
It's difficult to understand the decision-making processes that the city council goes through, because this city council is the most overturned city council I've ever seen, and it's overturned by itself. So I can't speak to why they would make those decisions. I know that there's been a lot of money expended. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars just to put an issue on the ballot, much less the couple $1 million one way or the other, whether they back out or stay in, the communications. I haven't been in those briefing rooms when they've discussed these things. I know that there's some union contract issues with it. These are complex things that they should not put out to the ballot, just like the Riverfront Park deal. These are complex issues they shouldn't put out to the ballot until they're prepared and they got the bugs worked out. And I just don't think they worked out the bugs. And it doesn't matter whether you stay in or go out. If you don't know where you're staying in or where you're going out, it's going to be a problem. And so I think it's just short-sighted decision-making more than anything else.
So what can you bring to the table that will reverse that process?
I'm going to bring nuts and bolts. We need to hammer these issues out. Don't come to me as a city councilman, as a representative of people that are paying taxes for all the services that we have in the city, with an idea to put on the ballot. Come with a plan. Come with a solid budget. You know what it's going to pay for. We can itemize it and tell the taxpayers what it is. Riverfront Park is a very good example of that. We thought we were going to have a pavilion. Then there was no pavilion. Oh, but then it was too expensive to tear the pavilion out. That's not a plan. That's a catastrophe of wasted money. They spent, I believe, almost 30% just in planning and consultants. That's not how jobs get done. You spend about 10% in planning and consultants. So because they don't have solid plans, they waste our time, our money, and misguide the voters. And then they steal money from the voters other areas where they've allowed the city to tax them to fix streets and sidewalks, like happened just a couple weeks ago in West Central, where they took their money to fix a bridge in Riverfront Park because they came to us with a plan that didn't fix the basic infrastructure of the park. So now they're taking money from other communities that put money into accounts to, bring up their neighborhood's quality of life.
And those funds were never intended for that sort of a purpose. They were for improvements in the neighborhood itself and economic development in those specific neighborhoods.
That's right. And the citizens were not expecting that money to be diverted from what they had intended the money be used for. So we've got to make better decisions.
So you're gonna rub some folks the wrong way in a lot of ways. I mean, because the kinds of things that you're talking about are things that are going to ruffle some feathers. Should you become a component on that council?
Well, my job on the council would be to represent the citizens' best interests, to follow the law. I see this council do things that are plain unlawful. I think we waste a lot of money on that and resources. And I'm supposed to represent the citizens in their best interests. And if it ruffles feathers, then it must not be the feathers that I flock together with.
This is a primary election coming up, and there's several people that are on this ballot.
Seven.
And this is 7 altogether. And this is the best opportunity for the selection of leadership that the voter will have this time around. The problem, however, has been, as you know, historically, people don't seem to turn out and participate in primary elections around here.
That's true. I know that in other states that they have primary elections at different times of the year. August is a very difficult time to have an election. People are busy getting ready to get their kids back into school, working that extra side job if they have to. So
or they're just at the lake.
At the lake
not
vacations.
Right now.
Right. They're missing the news. They don't know who to vote for. They don't know who the people are. When you knock on their door and they're not home in July and August, it's hard to have a conversation. So I think the timing of our elections is tough, but we can't fix that here from Spokane. That's a legislative issue.
But it does put some pressure on candidates, yourself included, obviously, to try to get out as many people to vote as possible. What are you doing on that front?
Of course, I'm putting out signs and I'm talking to citizens at their door, talking to businesses. And I've lived in the district, in Spokane my whole life, and in our current location 20 years. I think in the district 30 almost years. But really, I'm going to put my faith in the citizens that turn out to vote. The people that care, they're going to make the decision. And of course, they've been misled and lied to in the past, and we've ended up with some representatives that didn't quite represent. And so I'm hoping that citizens have gathered that, and this time around we'll get some representation in there, because I truly want to represent the citizens. Like I said, I don't care if I ruffle a few feathers from people that have agendas. I don't have an agenda going in except for serving the citizens of the district, and that's what we really need. So hopefully they turn out with that message, because I think that's what citizens really want at the end of the day.
There's an opportunity, obviously, uniquely in this particular primary election. We're going to eventually have a new mayor. We're going to have a new council president.
That's right.
And the complexion of the council can change, and rather dramatically, depending upon how the voters see things. So this is a slightly unusual opportunity if the voters can tune into this.
Yeah, this is a good time for the voters to be able to change the priorities of the city government. And of course, we've seen this city council vote to block international trade and international transport by rail and do some really ridiculous things that could really be a detriment to our city. And so the voters do have an opportunity here to change the complexion of their representation and how much money we want to waste in this city. Do we want to save money and get the things done that the citizens want? Or do we continue to waste money and make national headlines and make a fool of our city? So I'm hoping that the voters make a good decision on all the races and that they turn out. Obviously, we don't live in a democracy when you only have 25% voter turnout because that's representative voting, and I hope those voters choose well.
Let's talk about economic development. One of the things that's important to keep the city's lifeblood flowing, obviously, is to attract additional industry and build out the revenue base and create opportunities for jobs to keep people in the community and to keep them prosperous. We're in a current economy that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And insofar as that's the case, there's lots of opportunities associated with that. But if we make some wrong choices, we might not be able to take advantage of the environment that is at this moment quite favorable. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that in economic development, one of the things that we're going to see job creators, employers, small businesses, large businesses, they'll see opportunity in Spokane if Spokane's well run. if they see a Spokane that's taking radical positions that would put the taxpayers at risk, mismanagement of taxpayer dollars, those are the kinds of things that scare businesses away. And I think right now we could give incentives to businesses, but I think the biggest incentive is having a well-run city. And I think some of the things going on that we currently see with our current city council bothers businesses, and that's why they're choosing to locate outside of the city limits.
In terms of the downtown area, we have had cycles. You've been here a long time, so you know this. You've seen this. So I think we're in about the third revolution of this process, but where we have a commitment to building up the downtown, and then it sort of languishes a bit, and then there's another commitment to building it up, and then it languishes a bit, and now there's another effort to build it up. This time, however, the complexion is a little bit different because it has to do with downtown businesses who've been there a long time and have made a commitment to downtown, who are now being troubled by another problem that we have. We discussed, which is homelessness and the kinds of things that are discouraging customers from shopping downtown in many places. So, what kind of leadership can you bring to the resolution of that type of an issue and to the satisfaction of people who commit to doing business downtown?
Well, most of my district isn't downtown. So that's one of the things is we do put a lot of focus on downtown, and we forget about the fact that Northeast Spokane is the #1 revenue generator in the city. We generate about 40% of the retail sales tax revenue in the city, but we have 60 miles, I believe it is, of dirt roads. We have the most amount of dirt roads in the city. So when I look at District 1, and we get it done in District 1. We get the job done. This city doesn't get fed, doesn't get its yard mowed, it doesn't get its house cleaned, doesn't get its business janitorial services. All sorts of those industries are in District 1. So improve our roads, you'll have better service. You have better service, we can create more jobs. As far as downtown goes, I mean, yeah, we've seen these iterations of ideas. And it sounds great every time they come up with it. We've got a beautiful pedestrian bridge. In fact, one of my opponents has the pedestrian bridge on his flyer. It looks like he's got lots of strings attached. But the pedestrian bridge is going to be great for college students. But your citizen in District 1 can't go across the Post Street Bridge to pay their water bill. So I think we've got to start getting some priorities straight, and that will keep businesses downtown. And one of those priorities is plain enforcing the laws downtown and providing resources for the folks that are downtown that need rehab. But again, if we send someone through a drug rehab or a mental health, because a lot of times it's a mixture of self-medicating with mental health issues. If we send them through a rehabilitation program, but we're not getting the drug dealers off the streets, we're setting them up for failure. So we've got to solve those root causes, as we talked about earlier, first.
What would you say is the one issue, the one topic that the citizens are not getting their bang for the buck in investing in? What's the biggest thing that just irritates you?
The biggest bang for their buck. I see so many different places where we see waste, like Riverfront Park, too much money in planning and consultants and not enough planning done on the front end. The biggest bang, it's just I see waste on almost every end. The police are afraid to do their job. We don't have space to put criminals. We don't have a jail that has the capacity. So there's to me, I just see that there's money being wasted everywhere. I see we have a city that's running a program to discourage people from having green yards and instead have drought-resistant yards, and we'll give you $500. But at the same time, the city wants to have a greener city and a green canopy. A lot of times our dollars are competing against each other with our own city programs. So it's hard to nail down the biggest bang for our buck as far as quality. Definitely our parks. I mean, we have wonderful parks. There's lots of opportunities in Spokane. Obviously, if we were to brush over the negatives and just look at the opportunities, I think we have a lot of them. So our biggest bang for our buck would be to look at our opportunities, and we've got a lot of them if we quit getting in our own way.
We have had, you mentioned the effort to try to block the rail traffic involving coal and oil through, which was a big campaign that the council tried but failed to convince the voters was a good idea. Delving into areas of social engineering and what have you that just really do not seem to be basic municipality sorts of functions.
Right.
And there's a lot of that going on. Mm-hmm. Is this because of a political attitude or a political agenda that the council is functioning under, or is this a if you will, a passing fancy that will eventually fade away? What's going on there?
Well, I think it is political agenda, and I see a city council that's ideological. And really what we need to do is have an agenda that matches up with, the identity politics. We need a city council that their identity politics is a Spokane identity, not all these other agendas that they have. And so we do see things like the rail traffic. Now, that issue in itself could have cost the city taxpayers tens of millions of dollars, because rail traffic was actually what caused Spokane to exist. Without the rails, we wouldn't have a city. So those rail companies and the people that use those rail companies would have sued the city of Spokane into bankruptcy, probably, over time. So what we've got to do is focus on the real issues that citizens care about, and stop the ideology. There was a big thing in the news recently about a drag queen story hour at the public libraries. Now, a lot of people took the emotional side of that one way or the other, disagree, agree. But what ended up happening was the police overtime cost us millions of dollars a year in police overtime hours. Now, we want police to do property crime investigation. We want them to come out when we call them. And guess what? They don't have any hours left because we had an ideological issue that was brought to our public libraries that wasted possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's the one thing we forget to talk about in these ideological debates, is how much does it cost? And that one cost us a lot of money in dozens of police officers in several occasions to be on site for something that was unnecessary.
You mentioned that we don't have facilities to put offenders in.
That's right.
We were talking about a jail. The city was talking about building its own jail. I mean, all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
City-county cooperation is probably just as a proposition, probably less expensive than
Absolutely.
a city and county doing the same sorts of functions.
That's
We
right.
have the fire dispatch issue that's surface we talked about earlier, but the jail is another area, the court's another area, those sorts of things. It just seems as though there is what would you call it, a turf war or a battle of territory with respect to this thing that's unnecessary.
Well, it's not just a battle of territory, it's a battle of ideology. And I don't believe in mass incarceration, of course, but, if people are crossing the sidewalk and don't use the crosswalk, I don't think that we should be incarcerating those folks, right? But that's one side is pretending that that's what we're doing. But at the same time, what we're seeing is we're seeing people that have committed violent crimes get out of jail and commit another violent crime, even though the people that are working with that incarcerated folk knows that they know they're going to reoffend. Last year, I saw a fellow that got arrested in the morning for stealing a car. He was released the same day and caught again that evening stealing another car. So we can't solve crime that way. And I think for continuous offenders, we have offenders that have been caught not just dozens, but hundreds of times, property crime offenders. And I think for those chronic offenders, we can't just have a revolving door. And we have a prison that was built, I think probably maybe before I was born. It's an old prison. Maybe it wasn't before I was born, but I was very little.
You mean the city jail?
The jail.
Or county jail?
The county jail.
Yeah.
And so we've grown by 50,000 plus citizens in the region, city and county. And so just like your roads, you need to grow capacity. I think we've been on a jail diet. I think our roads are taking road diets, and we're adding population. And so we need to add services. When you have a larger population, you need bigger sewer lines, bigger water lines. So the service is on all ends. And we're paying for beautification rather than basic municipal functions of government. And as far as splitting the city and the county goes, that turf war, of course, will cost the taxpayers countless millions. And it's irresponsible, but this council doesn't seem to think responsible use of taxpayer funds matters. And when we talk about our region and having folks that are low income, working in lower wage jobs, I don't think we can raise taxes continually on them just because people want to have an argument over how to run basic municipal functions. Spokane County, we've been working with them for a long time in the courts, in the jails. It's a system that's worked. They've refined it a number of times, and it's a cost savings for the city taxpayer.
Answer a few quick questions, if you will. Why you knock on my door and you say I'm running for city council in my district. Why should I elect you?
I will represent you. I have no strings attached. I have no allegiances to outside interest. I'm interested in representing you. You have a problem in your neighborhood, call me. I've got a cell phone, and I'll answer it or I'll call you back. And we don't have a responsive city council right now, and we need to have one. And if you don't vote for me, vote for you, because we can't continue to see what we've been seeing.
So access to the council is an important part.
I believe so.
Is this not an accessible council? They all tell you, oh, yeah, you just give me a call, I'll be there.
Well, this
that's
council...
That's sort of a common promise, but
Yeah.
is that not necessarily one that's performed on?
Well, it's absolutely not true. I'm a neighborhood council chair. I've worked with the city. We've warned them about issues. We've got the North-South Freeway coming through. This last year, I've been working for 3 years to try to mitigate some of those problems. City didn't listen to me, and the council members didn't listen to me, or my neighbors. I'm the chair, so I'm representing them with their concerns as I go to the council. My wife did a great presentation before the council of the coming issues we were going to have if we didn't just put in a stop sign and a few little things here and there when they diverted traffic. We didn't get listened to, and it resulted in dozens and dozens of vehicular accidents and a safety hazard for the elementary school nearby. So they're not listening. They're not coming to our neighborhood council meetings. In fact, I think the only person that comes to our neighborhood council meetings on a regular basis is Mike Fagan. But the rest of the council is on its own. It sits on the dais and makes bad decisions and doesn't listen to the citizens. In fact, they limited public testimony.
How can voters who are interested in your campaign participate, and what's the process to get involved in your effort?
Well, definitely they can go to votetimbenn.com. They can go to my website. They can volunteer that way, donate, tell their friends about it. I'm on Facebook. They can share Facebook posts. They can put a sign up in their yard if they like, and they can talk to their neighbors. They can give me a call on my phone. My phone number's on my website. It's also on my flyers. And we need to start having a conversation about the real solutions, because I think the citizens have solutions. Actually, I know they do, because they've brought them up to me a number of times, and we're not hearing about it in the political debates like the drug issue. And so I think we got to start listening to the citizens, and we'll have a better city government.
He is Tim Benn, and he is running for Spokane City Council. And you now know how you can participate in his campaign. And that is this edition of Let's Talk. I'm Mike Fitzsimmons, and I thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's Talk is produced in Spokane, Washington by Spokane Talks Media, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksMedia.com. We wish you a great day.